Okay, so here we got the hamstrings, which we can see attached down here on the fibula and also on the tibia here. The main thing to note here is all the hamstring muscles, except for one, all attach here on the pelvis. Technically the ischium, or what people commonly refer to as the sits bones, because when you sit down, those are the ones that you're resting your weight on. So we have the biceps femoris, which is the biggest one. We have the semitendinosus. We have the semimembranosus right here. And we have the short head of the biceps femoris. This is the only hamstring muscle that doesn't attach onto the pelvis. It attaches onto the femur. So this muscle will be solely responsible for knee flexion and nothing else. So all hamstring muscles are going to contribute to knee flexion, and 3 out of the 4 of these are going to contribute to hip extension as well. So any exercise that flexes the knee or extends the hip is going to work the hamstrings. Now, interesting to note, we'll see a similar phenomenon with the hamstrings as we do with the rectus femoris, which is also a biarticular muscle, like these hamstring muscles, when it comes to double extension movements. Anytime we have double extension exercises, like squats, deadlifts, leg presses, that kind of thing, where we see simultaneous knee and hip extension. So when we're extending the knee, we're lengthening the hamstrings, and when we're extending the hip, we're shortening the hamstrings. So the hamstrings don't undergo a lot of length change. What we often see is that these exercises are not particularly great for hamstring hypertrophy. So when we're trying to grow and develop the hamstrings, we have to do the same thing that we do if we want to train the rectus femoris, is we have to fix either the knee or the hip joint in place. So exercises where we fix the hip in place and we're only working knee flexion are all your hamstring curl variations. So seated hamstring curls, lying hamstring curls, any of the dumbbell hamstring curl variations, Nordic hamstring curls, glute ham developer exercises. Any of those exercises will work the hamstrings quite well. Alternatively, if we fix the knee and we train pure hip extension, we can also train the hamstrings. So we'll see that with any kind of straight leg deadlift, any of the back extension exercises, whether it's a 45-degree back extension, the GHD back extension, any of that stuff will also train the hamstrings. The problem with that is you're also training the glutes a lot. So if you're really trying to isolate the hamstrings a lot, you're generally better off with a lot of knee flexion exercises, but there's nothing wrong with also incorporating a lot of those more straight leg movements, or we're trying to isolate hip extension. A lot of those straight leg movements, they're good all-around exercises for what we refer to as the posterior chain, where we're looking at kind of like this gross extension pattern where we're training most of the muscles on the rear side of the body. That would be like all your lower back, all your spinal erectors, your glutes, and your hamstrings. So when you do exercises like the GHD back extension, the glutes and the hamstrings are working very strong to extend the hip, and they're great for the back. And they're a great all-around exercise for training that posterior chain. They're not great for isolating the hamstrings if we're really trying to get after hamstring growth in particular, but they're a good like catch-all exercise. Okay, so we're splitting hairs here, and this stuff doesn't really matter that much, except for very specific circumstances. The hamstrings, unlike the quadriceps, so the quadriceps, all the muscles insert onto the patellar tendon. So it doesn't matter how you rotate your knee necessarily when you do your quad extensions. It's going to generally work all the quadricep muscles the same. The hamstrings, on the other hand, have these different attachment points. So we see here, these all attach on the medial side of the tibia, and then this one attaches onto the fibula and then this one inserts onto that same tendon as well. So with that, we can play around with kind of like rotating the knee when we do our hamstring curls. So if we internally rotate the tibia here, when we do our hamstring curls, we can kind of prioritize these more medial hamstring muscles here. Whereas if we externally rotate, we can isolate these more lateral hamstring muscles here. At the end of the day, that's something that most people, like 99.9% of people, will not have to worry about. But it is a thing that, these different hamstring muscles will contribute to kind of some rotational stability of the knee. So in general hamstring training, any exercise that trains pure hip extension or pure knee flexion. So any hamstring curl variation, and alternatively any kind of like a straight leg deadlift, GHD back extensions, the 45-degree, 30-degree back extensions, all that stuff, that's all going to train the hamstring.